Senator Mark Warner is now asking Facebook to provide more transparency over its policy and telling the company to hold itself to the same standards as cable networks, stating in a personal letter to CEO Mark Zuckerberg, quote, Facebook's apparent lack of foresight or concern for the possible damages caused by this policy concerns me, and going even further to state that transparency itself has, quote, been undermined, at least in part, because of the nature, architecture, policies and operation of platforms like Facebook. For more, let's bring in Senator Mark Warner in a CNBC exclusive interview. Good afternoon to you, Senator. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good afternoon.
At the headline, what's wrong with Facebook's current policy here?
Well, what Facebook, and let's be clear, we're talking about ads sponsored by politicians. First of all, we have no rules at all with those kind of ads. I think there should be basic disclosure requirements. Facebook has moved in that direction. I don't think fully, but they have moved in that direction. But this case of saying if a politician sponsors an ad, that politician can lie with impunity, I think has enormous repercussions. I think we even saw that in the testimony last week when Zuckerberg tried to defend this policy, and a member of Congress asked appropriately, well, what happens if somebody is running under the banner of the American Nazi Party? Does that, by the virtue of being a candidate, allow that kind of Nazi propaganda to be posted on Facebook, a Facebook that 68% of Americans look at on a daily basis, 170 million plus Americans, and there is going to be no governance at all on that kind of political advertising? And think as well, what's unique about Facebook is not only can a candidate put forward a purely false ad, but then that ad can be reinforced by foreign-based bots, by memes, by outside governments, and we can be assured that Russia and other nations will intervene in the 2020 election. And I think the Facebook policy plays directly into their hands. One last point, and we even saw this today, where someone has announced that they're running for governor in California way before the 2022 election, but he's going to go ahead and register as a candidate so he can start putting up fake ads right away. This is not going to improve the quality of our political debate, and I just wish Facebook would have thought this through rather than laying out this policy that I hope they'll reconsider.
Senator, as you make clear in this letter, three-page letter, that being allowed to lie with impunity seems, frankly, ridiculous to be something that should be permitted. So why do you think Facebook is doing this? Why not preempt it? Do you think they're just desperate for the dollars in what is going to be a bumper political year?
I hope not. Candidly, I think that Facebook could have avoided all of this. They're a big enough company. If they would have simply not allowed political advertising, probably the quality of our political debate might improve if that took place. They chose not to do that. That's their business decision. But I don't think this is a case of them trying to scrounge out a few more dollars. I do think there are legitimate First Amendment concerns, and clearly there is a First Amendment right. If you are a broadcast television station, you have an obligation under your FCC license to go ahead and put up that ad. Facebook has no such obligation. That's why I think Facebook, with their reach, with the ability to have their platform manipulated by bots, by other foreign influences, much different than broadcast or, for that matter, cable television. That's why I've suggested, look at the analogy is better to cable. Cable is willing to take down a political ad that is demonstrably false. It still falls on the obligation of an entity who can prove that the ad is demonstrably false. So that's a pretty high standard. And I think that standard would have worked well for Facebook. And again, my hope is that they will reconsider, because I think the absurdity of their current position, whether it's American Nazis or people running for governor in California today just so they can put up fake ads and lying ads, the threat that this poses with reinforcing activities of foreign governments, this is going to be a disaster.
So, Senator Warner, I mean, when you talk about the fact that Facebook has no such obligation, it gets right back at the heart of this regulation discussion that we've been having, and it begs the question then, why aren't lawmakers like yourself, and I know you've put some legislation out there, but why aren't lawmakers then passing regulations that would require a company like Facebook to adhere to some of those obligations that other types of communications companies have to as well?
Amen. I couldn't agree with you more. There is a bipartisan working group that's working on a privacy bill. I think that will be important. I've got bipartisan legislation that would require, if you advertise political ads on Facebook, same kind of disclosure if you advertise on CNBC. That should be a no-brainer. I've got bipartisan legislation that says we ought to know what kind of data is being collected on us and what it's worth.
But why hasn't it moved through Congress then?
Well, listen, that may be a more metaphysical question in terms of, I can assure you as somebody who works here, I am as frustrated as most of the viewers. I do have some optimism that we may see a bill move with privacy. Privacy is necessary but not sufficient. And these other bills, for example, a bill that would allow us to know whether we're talking to a human being or a bot. You know, we're not going to get rid of bots. I don't want to get rid of bots, but we ought to have that transparency. I do think, and I am hopeful still, that we could see privacy move within the next month or so, and then this other legislation attached to it. But you ask a very fair question. You know, we're 3.5 years after the Russians manipulated Facebook in 2016. Why don't we have rules of the road in place?
Even still, Senator, you're still just really talking about political advertising and then taking more responsibility for the authenticity and accuracy of that. Well, why not for all posts when they are making money alongside it, when they are actually promoting those posts? Should they not be held accountable as a publisher in the same way that a cable company would be for any advertisement, whether it's for a drink, for a cleaning product, or for a political ad?
Let me break that into two parts. The first part is, and Facebook, I will acknowledge, has made progress on this. The ads that they are having their current kind of policy standards saying that if it's demonstrably false, they'll deal with, would be political ads. So if there is a ad sponsored by the Republican Party or the Democratic Party or some third-party group. So they are taking more responsibility there. On the question about why not view Facebook the same way we would view any media company, that goes back to the rules that were set up in the late 90s. There was something created in the law called Section 230 exemption that basically said these platforms, Facebook, Google, are not responsible for any of their content. That probably made sense in the late 90s. These were nascent industries. But today in America, when 65% of Americans get some or all of their news from Facebook and Google, I think we do need to revisit that. The Section 230 debate is a complicated one. There's not a simple answer, but I think it's definitely time to roll up our sleeves and look at how we can reform on that. And we already have made reforms. We have, for example, prohibited sex trafficking, child prostitution, bomb making. So there has been some movement around content. Going further will be something that I think we have to explore.